Welcome to the Seeing Red podcast with Andi Turner and Garrett Fulce, checking up on Texas policies and politics with some federal issues thrown in, like the assault weapons ban, interest rate hikes, you get it, but it's mostly Texas, since we can't ignore the big stuff either. And now, here are your hosts, Andi Turner and Garrett Fulce.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us for episode 13 of Seeing Red. We appreciate you tuning in every Wednesday or whatever day you're listening, but we do drop these episodes every Wednesday and we try to be timely in our discussions, and we're happy you're back. And if you're tuning in for the first time, welcome. As always, you can reach us at facebook.com/the Seeing Red Pod, on YouTube at youtube.com/Seeing Red Pod. You can reach us on Twitter, like you can direct message us or you can post anything we've posted at the Seeing Red Pod. I want to say thank you to the Zipmeister for doing the social media. And I want to thank Garrett for doing the audio editing, because that's completely over my head. And also, as always, if you got something to say and you're not on social media and you got something you want to say, please do email us at hosts, HOSTS, at seeingredpodcast.com. So we are delighted to have you. And Garrett, how are you?
I'm doing well. I had a busy weekend. We spent a lot of time getting ready for our little bundle to come into the world. We've spent a lot of time over the past few weeks getting like the nursery painted. We built the crib. We got this incredible decal on the wall that fits our nursery theme. That's adorable. It was just a pain to put up. So we spent some time this week doing that. And then this weekend, really kind of got in there, and we had this old dresser we're repurposing. Had beat up paint on it, so we just decided to paint it a different color that kind of matched and kind of give it a fresh new life. And then it decided it wanted to start raining. It was about to start raining, so while it was still kind of wet, we had to hurry it into the garage. So at this point, I'm just waiting to see how much we have to repaint it. But, it's a lot of fun times getting ready, opening different gifts, and then putting them together. The whole some assembly required, don't like it. Not a fan. Not a big fan of the some assembly required, because it's a lot more than they tell you it's going to be. So,
well, some could be a little or it could be a lot. And believe me, as a parent of grown children, I remember all of this, and I would expect that some of our listeners are remembering going, oh my God, yes, putting together the crib. So we feel for you, but you're about to have the ride of your life.
We're looking forward to it so much. We are a little anxious, probably a little scared too, but also just looking forward to the challenges of parenthood. So that's really what took in a lot of my weekend this weekend. And then of course,
Garrett, let me just say, as a first-time parent, welcome to the club. We have jackets and warm cookies. We were all terrified. There's no manual for this. You're making it up, Yeah, so you're going to be okay. You're going to be all right.
We're looking forward to it. So, that's what's been going on here. But, always keeping my ear to what's happening. And there was a lot of news breaking over the weekend into the early part of this week.
There was breaking news today that Dan Patrick, God bless him, is taking the $3 million that Defend Texas Liberty gave him, a campaign contribution. He's taking all of that money and he's donating it directly to a fund that will fund Israeli bonds. And he made a very strong condemnation for hate within our own party. And I couldn't be more pleased. I am delighted that he has stood up and said, you know what? This is bull. And for him to give that money away, I know, it couldn't have been, this is $3 million, and he's going to have an upcoming election, whatever that is. And that's a hard thing. It's a hard thing for any of them to do, but you know what? Good for him for doing the right thing. And, good for Speaker Phelan for calling everybody out to do this. And I'm not saying that the lieutenant governor did this because of the speaker, but the speaker called for it first. And I'm thrilled. I am absolutely thrilled.
Well, there's a few things I wanted to talk about with what you just said. So the first, I'll start from the end and kind of work my way backwards. One is, yes, Speaker Phelan did call for it, and it looks like Dan Patrick is at least doing it his own way to get there. But what should be interesting is that the first comment immediately afterwards ended up spending more time and more effort trying to condemn Speaker Phelan than it did condemn anti-Semitism and ill effects on America, the Republican Party, and everything. And then obviously the ill effects it's had and the fact that it's led to the murder of another couple thousand Jews in Israel over the past few weeks. That said, Dan Patrick didn't donate $3 million. He invested the $3 million, which takes it away from him being able to use it on the day-to-day for campaigns because he invested it in a bond, or he's saying he's investing it in bonds. So at some point, those bonds will mature and he'll get that money back and he'll get some interest on top of it. But basically, he's parking the money until we've forgotten how he got it. So if he has a 2-year or 3-year maturity, we're looking at 2 years. He's being at least 2 years and a few months away from needing to actually use any money in a primary.
I mean, this money from DTL is like, I was thinking about this earlier, Garrett. It's like glue, right? Right? Adhesive. And it's stuck to you until you get rid of it. And so I am happy with everybody that has,
the money is sticky. And it's interesting that Dan Patrick has decided to keep it under his purview in the interim by investing it in a bond, and where he can get that sticky money back in the future where it can be stuck to him once again.
Garrett, you're going to be really angry with me. I'm going to pivot off your story for a minute. Breaking news, Speaker Phelan calls on Texas GOP Chair Rinaldi to resign. I think let's go into that. So the SEC said, so mailers went into Beaumont. First of all, gosh, let me do this backwards. So there was a letter that that 22 members of the SREC, basically the executive committee, signed that was strongly condemning the hate, the anti-Semitism, all of that. 2 of them were my SREC members. So proud of Fernando and Jan for that. But the thing was, this letter went out, and there was a lot of back and forth about how ridiculous this letter was, and this and that and the other thing. They signed it and made it public anyway. And here's what's happened. Rinaldi didn't sign it.
He didn't just not sign it. He's been actively working and campaigning among SREC folks for people to not sign it.
Right. And so worse, right? All these mailers, I got a couple calls from friends out of Beaumont. One particular friend in very special to me, Mrs. C. We'll just call her Mrs. C. She told me about these mailers that defend Texas liberty, maybe others, but defend Texas liberty. And then they have a quote from Chairman Rinaldi himself, who has gotten in the middle of a primary race against an incumbent supporting an unknown entity. Now, this guy, I don't know his background. Perhaps he's a wonderful Republican and this and that and the other thing. But the chairman of the county, the chairman of the state, has no business getting involved in Republican primaries. Let them work themselves out and then work to get the winner elected. But no, Chairman Rinaldi, for whatever reasons, well, and I could speculate.
Let's talk a little bit about why that is. The reason is because the primary job of the county and state parties, the primary legal function where most of their money has to go to typically, is towards administrating a fair primary vote. And when you're endorsing and actively working against candidates in that actual election, when you're also responsible for the fair administration of that election, well, a lot of questions are going to be raised about the validity of that election. We talk about election integrity all the time. You diminish the election integrity of any race involving somebody you've endorsed against whenever you are in charge of administrating a primary. As a lot of these county chairmen are going to find out soon, all this rancor and all this fomenting of election accountability, whenever they're doing these types of actions, it's going to come back to bite them pretty quickly. But Downen wrote this story originally about Fuentes coming into DTL, Defend Texas Liberty, and that Rinaldi was also there, And then Rinaldi quickly had a statement out saying, oh, I was just there to use the conference room. Even though the person he said he was there to meet with, they both lived like 20 minutes from each other, and the headquarters was like an hour away from both of them. Whatever. You can find a conference room for any number of reasons. Sure. He at least had a quote-unquote alibi. But what's ignored in all of this is that, or not what's ignored, what Downing has said is that in his tweet, he's the one who wrote the original story for the Texas Tribune. He's the reporter that broke the story. He said that Dan Patrick is redirecting the $3 million he received from DTL, which just hosted Hitler admirer Nick Fuentes. The announcement came after we reached out to him for comment on a forthcoming story. The rumors we've been hearing is that there was another meeting, and that there are emails exchanges, text exchanges, that detail more about the information we talked about last week, where what worried us the most was we didn't know what they were talking about. So it makes me think that Dan Patrick has a little bit more understanding of what's about to come out, and he's trying to get ahead of it. Because Dan Patrick worked in the mainstream media. We give him a pass now, but he worked in the mainstream media for decades. He was a shock jock for some more time, and he still owns a radio station to this day in Houston. And we have to recognize that he is an animal of the media environment, and of all the people kind of in this sphere, and giving Dan Patrick at least the benefit of being several orbits outside of it than others, he's by far the most attuned to public relations and public perception. So if Dan Patrick is now coming up with the full-throated attack against a condemnation of anti-Semitism and how it shouldn't be involved in the Republican Party of Texas, I honestly, and with this news that Dade Phelan's now calling on Rinaldi to resign, if I were a betting man, which I am, I would bet that there's going to be even more information tying Rinaldi not just to DTL but to Fuentes that comes out in this reporting, and there are going to be a lot more calls for his resignation from folks.
You know, for me, Matt Rinaldi has no business, after this came out, of aligning himself further with DTL. Let's assume the best.
Well, we don't know when those were mailed. We don't know when those were mailed, and they could have been mailed before, and it takes a week and a half to get there based off where they were mailed from.
Yeah, right. So let's go with your theory on this, right? Let's assume, why then did Matt Rinaldi not immediately jump on board and go, no, we do not foment hatred based on skin or religion or whatever. We do not foment bigotry in this party. Why was not the first thing out of his mouth? And you know what? For the speaker to be calling for his resignation, I'm on board. I couldn't be more on board. He has no business in a primary. And I don't care whose primary it is. I don't care. Matt Rinaldi, as chairman, has no business getting involved in a primary. If the people that any particular legislator, including Dade Phelan, they don't want him in office anymore, believe me, there will be enough momentum to take any legislator out if they are that angry with him. But under Speaker Phelan, we've had a lot of conservative bills passed. Really hugely conservative bills. Some more conservative than anything else in the country. Under Speaker Phelan. We got the trigger ban. We got open carry. We got the largest tax cut in the history of Texas. We got a complete ban, constitutional ban on the state income tax. We got the Reader Act. We got the all of the reforms needed to secure ERCOT. We got billions of dollars towards defending the border, absent the federal government. And that's just the things I can think of off the top of my head. There are more and more and more and more. And look, you know, I have my own personal feelings on the right to life bill, the abortion bill. And that's a story for another day. But that bill was probably the most strict bill in the 50 states. And it passed under the speaker's watch and under the lieutenant governor's watch. But How do you say, oh, he's not conservative enough? How you say that he is not conservative enough after, that and property taxes and the 19 bills we passed in the 2021 session and pro-gun, because I was there. That was literally my job. And how you say, oh, he's not conservative enough. What more do you want? Like, seriously, what more do you want? Okay, we'll move on.
Yeah, so one of the things I want to talk about more about, which is we talked kind of a little bit about the SREC letter that I think has gotten at time of recording 22 signatures. Obviously, they all need to be signing it. I think they'll all be joining on in a little bit. What's interesting, though, is during all of this, there are a couple folks who, and to use it as an example, kind of the Paxton impeachment. The SREC mostly broke with Rinaldi in supporting Paxton, while there were some people who either remained silent or backed the House. There were some folks who were pretty vocal on Twitter. One's a guy named Orlando Garcia, I believe out of SD16. You can look on that little. He's a signer on this letter, and he was a massive defender of Ken Paxton during the impeachment trial. Another woman on there, Tisha Crow from SD31. These were two people who are massive proponents of Ken Paxton during the impeachment trial. They have signed this letter. This is not the usual dividing lines on the SREC with how they've existed over the past couple of years. This is people standing up saying, listen, we support a lot of what the types of candidates and breaking up whatever in Austin, and we support that, but we can't do that in a valid way with the support and the aid of white supremacist, anti-Semite, white nationalists. It's counterproductive at the very least. But I'm not going to speak for them. It's wrong to associate with those types of people. We have to sever them from our organization. We are a big tent, but our big tent does not include swastika wearing, Charlie Chaplin mustache aficionados. We have a line in the sand when it comes to anti-Semitism and bigotry, and these folks who typically align with what DTL has done publicly have said we got to hold them accountable now, which is stunning. It's really stunning. And I think there's a lot of fruit coming to bear here, where the RPT and Rinaldi and Stickland and all these people who like to play in the media and like to get their name out there whenever they can and kind of like be a little annoying assholes and like try to snipe a candidate here and there and make their money off of it, have run into the problem of what actually happens when you have to govern, which is you have to deal with real problems on a day-to-day basis, and you can't just go with what you think is going to go well on Twitter or with your friends and family. You have to do the right thing in spite of that sometimes, because it's the right decision and you're the person charged with or responsible for doing the right thing. And Matt Rinaldi has been found wanting, plain and simple.
Granted, in a different state, but as a leader in the Republican Party, I got to tell you, getting involved in a primary is enough for me to say, go far away. Go far away. You are not leading. You are not inspiring people. And by the way, you're not really raising a whole lot of money either. All
the money that Rinaldi is raising is from Defend Texas Liberty via the Duns.
That's exactly right. So, yeah, it's just... Okay, so I could rant and rave about this all day, but I won't.
One last thing before we move on to border security. The SREC is fighting back now, but one of the things Matt Rinaldi has done, he deleted all the SREC's emails off of the website.
I heard about this. And they're saying, oh, it's because we're going to a forms format. But yet, But I noticed that they didn't take everybody's emails off, just the executive committee.
Well, here's the thing. There have been people nipping at the heels of the conservative movement for at least 70 years, since the 50s. Because the modern conservative movement in America really started in the 50s, had its first peak with Goldwater in 64, and came to glory with Reagan in 1980, and has been a slow plateau, probably downward ever since. So, ever since then, there have been organizations, and the classic example is the John Birch Society, that were more willing to work with folks that were Nazis at that point, or neo-Nazis, or anti-Semitic, because they wanted to push the agenda and they just wanted to have more people coming to their own events. They would wink and nudge towards them. And there have been some people within the Republican Party, in some states or wherever, that have tried to kind of do a little dance, shall we say, to at least keep that support or turn those voters out. There's a long history of it. And we have to disavow that type of behavior.
We have to not just disavow, we have to shut it down. And it starts with all of you talking about this and getting the word out and saying, you know what, I'm not putting up with this. And letting them know that you have no intention of tolerating this. And this is my party. This is our party. I don't want to see bad things financially for our party. But you know what? I'm not going to, until this all gets straightened out, where we've got a chairman who actually leads and has good quality leadership, who actually can fundraise and stays the heck out of primaries and doesn't commit Republican on Republican crime, and also, by the way, doesn't have any association whatsoever with, people who engage in hateful behavior. And I mean hateful behavior.
Just remember, Rinaldi lost a winnable race to a Democrat, and it seems like he's doing everything in his power to do that to the rest of the Republican Party throughout Texas. And if you want to keep Republicans in office and keep radical Democrats from taking over the levers of power in the greatest state in the country, in the world, of Texas, we have to get rid of Rinaldi. We have to do what we can to hold the House, grow our numbers in the House, same in the Senate, and keep all of our statewide electeds. But Matt Rinaldi is doing, it seems like, everything he possibly can to weaken the Republican Party to a point where the Democrats can start winning again. And we just can't tolerate that.
I agree. So you mentioned session, and session will be ending shortly. I have not been paying attention, and maybe you can help me out. I know we're working on a border security bill. I know nothing about it. And then I heard something about Colony Ridge, but I've been following so many other things. I haven't had a chance to catch up with this. Do you know? What do you know?
I know a little bit. So we're recording this on the 23rd, so bear with me if anything has changed since then. They were laying out HB 6 today in the third special session of the 88th legislature. And it was a bill that's primarily focused on getting another $1.6 billion towards Texas border efforts, border security efforts. Now, a lot of that money just goes to the payroll of Texas Guardsmen, DPS, people. Because it doesn't really, unlike some programs in the private or public sector, whenever it talks about people, it doesn't scale. It's like, oh, you want it to get bigger. You don't start getting like economies of scale with it, because it requires more and more people on something like border security. So if you want double the border security, you need to have 500 people instead of 250 people, or 10,000 people instead of 20,000 people, right? So those salaries are usually about the same, so it usually costs double to double it. That's what that means. Texas is also building the wall on property that it owns, and typically this type of program is front loaded by the federal government. They may give a grant to they might give an expenditure to a state to actually roll out the actual program itself, find the contractors, whatever. In this case, with the Biden administration, they've done whatever they can to eliminate the state from that process and to not do the work, while Texas is still pushing through on as much of the work as they can, as much as we can afford, while also maintaining our roads, our schools, our DMV, etc. And we've come to a point now where they need another $1.6 billion. Well, Democrats today decided to spend a lot of time talking about Colony Ridge. Colony Ridge is a land development in Liberty County near Cleveland, Texas, that has caused a lot of consternation because there apparently are a lot of people, illegal immigrants who live there. Now, it's kind of first started because there were a lot of children who lived there who were going to Cleveland ISD schools, and the schools were having a hard time making sure they had the public facilities available for that, because the Supreme Court has ruled a few times that doesn't matter where you come from. If you're a kid in Texas, you have to, or in the United States, you have to have a spot in a public school. And then there was stuff about how like the community was built for illegal immigrants. All that aside, it's effectively a trailer park, or it'll have things that are either outright manufactured homes or slightly above what's considered, what's the name for it? It's just
Section 8.
No, there's a colonia. It's slightly a colonia. For those who don't know, are these communities along the border where immigrants will typically move to. They'll just immigrate. They'll immigrate across and basically put up shanties, whatever type of housing they can, just to have a roof over their head in case it rains or the wind blows. They don't have any utilities or minimal. There's no building codes. It's just a structure. There have been issues with the donor from Colony Ridge being a big-time Republican donor, having basically given to everybody, and then a quote-unquote lack of insight or oversight. But all this to say is, Democrats were pissed off, and they have been talking about Colony Ridge as a joke, about how Republicans don't really understand or are making up something. Well, there's a lot to be looked into at Colony Ridge. There's a lot we don't know about what's actually happening. There are stash houses there. There are things. So the HB 6 is legislation that's focused on the border area itself. And there's other legislation, I believe so that was being carried by Representative Ton. And he said today, there seems to be a lot of obsession by Democrats with this Colony Ridge stuff, because they want to take the onus off of Biden and try to put it somewhere else. HB 6 is supposed to be focusing on the border security. I believe HB 4 is focusing on the stash house by Spiller. I could have the bill name wrong. It's focusing on like stash houses, and then like certain things about developing land that would like do that sort of stuff. But there's already a bunch of laws in Texas about how, like, if you're a landlord and you know that criminal activity is happening at on your property, if you don't do things to remove the criminal element from it, and you aren't taking active steps to remove it, the state can condemn that and foreclose on that property and seize that property, because as a way of paying back the community for all the criminality that's taken place because you've profited from it that way. They already have laws like that in Texas because of meth labs and other things that have happened. So all of that to say is there's some consternation right now by the Democrats trying to make Colony Ridge into a boogeyman, when in reality, HB 6 is focused on the border, getting the border done. HB 4 is focused on enhancing penalties towards bad folks, and it seems like Democrats are trying to make it look like Colony Ridge isn't a big deal, when we really don't know, and they need to be doing some investigating to actually figure out what they can do, what the Texas government can do to ameliorate it.
Okay, so Garrett, what you're telling me, so you mentioned stash houses. So what you're telling me is there are houses where they stash drugs. My question is, what else are they stashing there? Are they stashing children? Are they stashing women? I mean, is there human...
Probably.
Right, but like, this is, it's a thing. And for the Democrats to be making light of, the crimes going on there, and never mind the fact that just crossing over illegally is a federal crime. We apparently don't want to talk about, the other crimes that are being committed. And listen, I understand some of these people are escaping some very bad places, but the bottom line is Colony Ridge is not some development with little tiny houses, little tiny, what we call them, tiny houses. We don't have enough border security to take care of everything that's going on down at the border. And all of this needs to be taken very seriously. And good on Spiller for his, making it tougher on crime down there. And good on Representative Jatone for sponsoring the bill for further border control. I mean, if we can stop them from coming in, then we can lower the crime and hopefully lower, the trafficking that's coming in and the drugs. And I mean, we could get into fentanyl issues, but, so good for them. And I'm proud of them. And I'm proud to know both of them. So,
yeah. Well, and I would say that I think it's just interesting that the Democrats are playing this playbook again when it's gone so poorly for them. Democrats like to put their head in their sand and throw up boogeymen when it comes to immigration. When hard on immigration stances are generally supported by recent immigrants because they know what it takes to become an American, and they want that to be a continued requirement. But what's also interesting is that whenever they've passed sanctuary city legislation and then Governor Abbott has bused people to sanctuary cities that have said, hey, we're a sanctuary, we think it'll be okay, you'll have all the services you want. Well, now New York City, Chicago, LA, Washington DC, Philadelphia, all these places have all hit a wall saying, this is too many people. And it's like, well, we have 60,000 people on the border a day, or whatever the number is. It's a lot. It's like, we have thousands of people coming over into our communities a day. Our communities cannot do this, and the federal government, who's letting them all in, isn't doing anything to help. So no, LA, you get to have some of these people. You said you wanted a sanctuary city. So I don't understand why the Democrats are playing the same playbook again. Doesn't feel like it's going to go well for them.
No, and in fact, it isn't. I mean,
on this issue,
in fact, it isn't. I mean, they are. I mean, I know the New York City mayor has come out and said we can't take anymore, and it's like, well, no, wait a minute, you're the one that passed these laws in the first place, and I've had.
He went from we got it, we got this to
What was the line out of the movie? I got it, I don't got it. So, you know, I mean, it was all fun well and good when it felt good, but now, you know, and I've had people say to me, well, this is just cruel. And people are free to express with me and with Garrett, but with me, any viewpoint they want to express, as long as you do it calmly and politely, and, you know, I can exchange ideas. And you don't understand, you know, you're shipping them off. I'm like, you're shipping them off to sanctuary cities who will give them a state ID, who will give them some health care. Why are you against this? Like, they're getting things they need. So for what reason could you possibly be against this? And they got no answer. They got no answer for me. So
they just feel like it feels racist to them. Like, oh, we're putting brown people on buses and busing them somewhere else.
Busing them where they're going to get better services.
I don't think you understand how many people are coming in, and I don't think you understand the demographics of Texas.
Yeah, right.
We aren't afraid of diversity in Texas. We're probably one of the most diverse states in the country when you look at our Hispanic population, our black population, our white population, and our Asian population. We have diversity in Texas. We get along with one another. We get along really well with one another. In a conservative state, we get things done. We figure out a way to get it done because we don't do things like they do it in D.C. We do things like we do them in Texas. And we have a lot of people coming in, and we don't have the resources or the facilities to take care of them. And there are people who have said, hey, we have that facility. We're a sanctuary state. Great. We can't send them across the border. We can send them to LA. We can send them to Aspen. We can send them to Denver. We can send them all these other places because we don't have the facilities for them. And most people, when they come to the United States, aren't looking to necessarily stay in Texas unless they have family here. People look to go where their family already is, and it's typically people who already have a relation. They're not looking to go to start over new. They're looking to go find part of the community they had in Honduras or El Salvador or Mexico, and they're going to go find that community where those people have moved, wherever they've moved in the U.S. We just need to move them to be processed somewhere else, because Texas is the furthest south, closest to Mexico City, and closest to Central America. So they're not going all the way to Tijuana to be processed into California, because Texas is closer. And we have to move those people more quickly. And that's where we're at. And we need more border security so that at least they're funneled through a border security checkpoint so we know that they're here. So that we keep catching these Hamas terrorists, these ISIS terrorists, these people who are on our list to say, hey, these are terrorists who are trying to sneak in this way. Because we keep catching those people. But we still have 1.6 million gotaways over the past 2 years. 1.6 million gotaways, which are people that DPS came into contact with and they weren't able to capture.
I get you. I'm with you.
And that doesn't include the people who came in that we don't know about. Or the people who came in on a visa and overstayed. But we want to funnel as many people into that area of they got a visa and they stayed and we know they're here and we need to find them. Or people, but we know that they're probably not criminals. On people who came in through a port of entry and we know who they are.
Agreed.
We have to keep funneling people at the very least.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, we got to wind it up somewhere, so this seems like a good point because otherwise we're just going to go off for another hour and nobody wants to listen to that. So we're going to let you go. And
I'd listen to it.
Yes, but we're nerds. And not everybody listening to this is nerds. So, we want the cool kids to come back and listen. So anyway, thank you all for joining us on...
Only the cool kids listen. If you're a nerd and you're listening to this, tune out. We only want the cool kids.
I love you, Garrett. You're awesome. Anyway, all right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in again for this week's edition of Seeing Red. And I will miss you all next week. And Garrett, we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Go Rangers. Bye, guys.
You've been listening to the Seeing Red podcast. It's always Texas politics and beyond. We present the facts and opinions. The Seeing Red podcast with your host, Andi Turner and Garrett Fulce. Thank you, and tune in next week. And please do us a favor. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode.